Back in Family Guy's early seasons, Chris was a dumb but good-natured kid. But as the years have gone by, he's basically transformed into this creepy, gross pervert.
2, 1! Some animals give me boners!
He became depraved, way more violent, and has racked up an absurdly high kill count. So in this video, I'm going to cover every bad thing that Chris Griffin has ever done. To keep things more concise, I won't be including anthology episodes. I also won't count weird stuff like sticking his wiener in a pie.
It's all burned! I can't tell what's chicken and what's meat!
Or, you know, other odd moments like creating a homemade girlfriend with iceberg lettuce boobs.
I think Heather will be eating breakfast standing up this morning, if you know what I mean.
Because while that stuff is very bizarre, it's mostly just Chris humiliating himself.
You don't want to be in here, dude.
So, let's get started. Robbing Mort's pharmacy in season 4's Brian the Bachelor. When Chris gets a giant zit that he affectionately calls Doug, it somehow comes alive.
You can talk?
That's right, and we're gonna raise some hell!
Alright, raise some hell!
Doug turns out to be a terrible influence on Chris and encourages him to act out, like convincing him to leave a flaming bag of crap on Joe's doorstep.
Duty!
I'm doing the dishes, Joe. I'll change you in a minute.
Or getting him to lift up women's tops.
There, are you happy, Doug?
The funny thing is, here, Chris acts like he's so upset to be doing this, but this behaviour is only normalised for him in later seasons, but we'll talk a bit more about that later on. So when Lois notices how much the pimple is affecting Chris, she says that they're heading to the pharmacy to get rid of it. But Doug isn't gonna go down that easily and makes Chris break into the pharmacy and rob the place. Chris eventually tries to resist, but by this point, the pimple has basically taken over his brain.
And I just might reach into your brain and do this!
Ow! Okay, I'll listen.
Chris then goes to the doctors, only for Doug to pull out a gun. But before the Zit can shoot him, Chris stabs him with a syringe and kills him once and for all. So technically, it wasn't really Chris doing all these awful things. It was his evil talking pimple controlling him. And look, who amongst us hasn't been manipulated into committing a crime by a sentient Zit before? It happens to the best of us. And if you start growing something that talks, then I would recommend finding a trusted doctor through ZocDoc, today's video sponsor. In all seriousness, ZocDoc is a free website where you can compare high quality in-network doctors. You can search through more than 150,000 verified doctors across 200 plus specialities, and then narrow it down by location and insurance. But what's really useful is that you can see real reviews and available appointment times and then book instantly online. I can't tell you how many times I've called my local practice, sat on hold forever, and then finally spoke to a rude, unsympathetic receptionist who tells me there are no appointments left that day. But with ZocDoc, you can skip all that hassle and in many cases get seen within 24 to 72 hours, and sometimes even that same day. I know it may seem small, but just clicking the link in the description of this video is a huge step towards prioritizing your health. So stop putting off that doctor's appointment and go to ZocDoc.com/LydiaLoves to search for top rated doctors today. And again, it's completely free. Thanks again to ZocDoc for partnering with me and helping us all take better care of our health. Moving on, we have the time that he destroyed Brian's petition to overturn the gay marriage ban, which was in season 4's You May Now Kiss the Guy Who Receives. Let's be honest, Chris is an awkward social outcast, so when a pretty girl starts showing interest in him, he'll basically do whatever she says. Like when his crush Alyssa turns out to be a religious conservative, and he just goes along with whatever she believes.
I don't understand what you're saying, but somehow I feel safer.
And when the mayor plans to ban gay marriage, it means Brian's cousin Jasper can no longer get married, so Brian works tirelessly to collect 10,000 signatures to overturn it. But in an attempt to impress Alyssa, Chris burns the petition.
I'm gonna get to touch right-wing boob because of this.
Despite the setback though, Brian still manages to collect all 10,000 signatures all over again, but when the mayor ignores it anyway, Brian snaps and takes him hostage. Meanwhile, Alyssa tells Chris that as soon as gay marriage is officially banned, he can finally get to second base.
I got a feeling that before the end of the day, I'm gonna be burying my dog.
Whoa. I said you could touch my boobs. Let's start with that.
But then the mayor decides not to sign the law after all, and Jasper is free to marry. Now, we never find out what happened to Alyssa after this, but it is safe to assume she probably blamed Chris for his dog unbanning gay marriage and therefore stopped talking to him. Burning the petition was an absolutely D move, especially since he was helping to take away people's rights just to impress a girl. But at least he had the good sense to regret his actions.
I think I made Brian crazy. Maybe I shouldn't have burned that petition.
Oh no, Chris, you did the right thing.
In both this and the last example, Chris is shown to be super impressionable. Whether it's a talking pimple or a girl he likes, he'll just go along with terrible ideas if someone tells him to. Which leads us nicely into our next entry. Breaking Brian's face in season 6's Long John Peter. When Brian gets a nappy removed from his stomach at the vet, Chris falls for the pretty receptionist.
You feel it in my kiss. I'm crazy for you.
Say what you will about Chris, and trust me, I definitely will, but you gotta admit, he has a lovely singing voice. And despite his painfully awkward small talk, the receptionist actually ends up liking him back.
Sometimes I have to poop for a long time. Now you say something.
The two start dating and everything is going surprisingly well. That is until Peter gets involved and gives Chris some absolutely horrific dating advice, which is basically, treat her mean, keep her keen.
Yes, can I have 2 tickets? 1 man and 1 bitch that needs to do what I say?
Naturally, this has the complete opposite effect and she dumps him. So desperate to win her back, Chris tries to think of an excuse to return to the vet, so he smashes Brian in the face with a chair.
I'm here with my dog. He's not feeling well.
Fuck you.
And while Chris regains the girl's trust back, he shows zero concern for Brian, who's left bleeding out on the floor.
Okay, somebody really needs to help me here.
And while I will give him a pass for treating his date badly because he got terrible advice from his dad, the fact that he had no issue breaking his dog's face and letting him almost die is absolutely awful. And speaking of treating his dates horribly, we come to Mistreating Connie from season 7, Steroids. Popular girl Connie D'Amico challenges herself by taking the least cool kid in school and making him the most popular.
Oh my god, I could smell him from here. He's perfect.
So Connie asks Chris out and gives him a makeover, and because he's actually pretty sweet under all that stink, Connie finds herself falling for him.
You're really pretty, and I hope I get to be with you for a long time.
Wow.
Her plan works and Chris becomes super popular, but it completely goes to his head. He throws a massive party at his house and starts making out with other girls right in front of Connie.
Come on, girls, let's go upstairs and make out.
Chris turns into a total douchebag and eventually makes Connie a social outcast. And if that wasn't douchey enough, he randomly throws a javelin into his sister.
Hey, Meg, think fast. Loser.
So Meg and Connie team up and humiliate Chris by showing a video that he made dressed up as Buffalo Bill. And just like that, Chris goes back to being unpopular. And while he does apologize to Meg, he never really makes things right with Connie after treating her like garbage. The sad thing is that Connie actually grew to really like him.
There's something about him. He's not like the other guys. I actually really like him.
And Chris repaid that by ditching her the second that he got popular and helped ruin her social life for absolutely no reason. Next up, crushing his dad's head in season 8's Hannah Banana. We've already seen how violent Chris can get when he smashed Brian's face in, but this episode showed an even more sadistic side to him. When the evil monkey living inside Chris's closet turns out to actually not be evil, the two start bonding and the monkey basically becomes the father figure that Chris never had. This makes Chris realise just how much of a crappy dad Peter's been to him. The two have a falling out and Chris sets up an elaborate trap where Peter wins a free hat if he stands between two restrained logs. Now, obviously, because this is a cartoon, Peter survives, but in any realistic situation, this is flat out attempted murder. However, while Chris took things way too far, I do understand why he was so angry at Peter for being an awful father. Still though, trying to cave your dad's skull in with giant logs is maybe a slight overreaction. Moving on, and we have seriously hurting Stewie and not getting him any help from season 8 Brian Griffin's House of Pain. When Chris still makes diary to tease her, the two end up accidentally knocking Stewie down the stairs. This tumble cracks Stewie's head open and he passes out. And scared of getting into trouble, they decide not to get him medical treatment and simply just hide his open wound.
Hey, how's the food, Stewie? Oi, blimey, it's a right delicious, I do declare, waka waka.
They leave it so long that the injury starts growing and festering, and at one point, Chris even allows a raccoon to gnaw on Stewie's exposed brain.
They look like little robbers.
And then when Peter finds out, he helps by just tossing Stewie underneath Lois's moving car. And sure, knocking Stewie down the stairs was an accident, but refusing to get your severely injured baby brother medical treatment is so unbelievably selfish. And Chris had no issue watching Stewie's condition get worse and worse.
I know we're not gonna do this, but at this point I almost think we should just cut him up and flush him down the toilet.
Okay, let's not talk about his freaky deaky relationship with Meg. In Season 9's Halloween on Spooner Street, Chris and Meg attend a costume party and play a game of 7 Minutes in Heaven. Meg gets paired up with someone dressed as Optimus Prime, only to discover that it was Chris the entire time.
Oh, we did so much! Shut up, shut up, shut up!
By the way, it is kind of ironic that she was paired with a Transformer, seeing as her name is literally Megatron. Of course, they're both horrified. At first anyway, because they weirdly make peace with it pretty quickly.
I hooked up with a chick tonight, and I am pretty darn proud of myself.
Now, to be fair, this particular incident is somewhat understandable since neither of them knew who the other person was in the dark, but the problem is that it was the start of something very wrong. Because in Season 12, it's revealed that Chris and Meg still bathe together.
Chris, our bath is ready.
And a season later, in This Little Piggy, Chris discovers that Meg is a foot model, and he then spends 15 minutes whacking one out to her tooties. And if that somehow wasn't enough, in Season 16 the two are shown almost kissing before then getting interrupted. And disturbingly, this isn't the last time that the show has joked about Chris being inappropriate towards his own family members. And I'm not even bringing up the time that he sucked on his grandmother's hand.
Sometimes I pluck them, because I deserve pain.
Next up, shooting his dad in Season 9's German Guy. When Chris befriends a seemingly friendly German puppeteer, Herbert gets worried. Not just because he's jealous of losing Chris, but also because Franz is actually a Nazi. When Chris discovers the truth, Franz takes him and Peter hostage, and in the struggle, Peter manages to knock the gun towards Chris.
How do I know which one is the real dad?
We never switched. Wait, we don't even look the same. Ah!
Dad!
Now, there's no real malice here, it's more Chris just being a total dumbass and couldn't tell the difference between an old man and his dad. Let's move on to stalking his teacher in Season 11's Space Cadet. Chris's teacher asks him to come up and read his own personal essay, and the topic he chose is this.
Following Mrs. Donovan by Chris Griffin.
Following his teacher is hella creepy, but I would say that it doesn't sound like he did it to be a peeping Tom. He's just an idiot who thought it would be an interesting topic. Even still though, Chris's voyeuristic tendencies would get so much worse. Keeping his brother prisoner in his backpack in Secondhand Spoke from Season 12. When Stewie notices how much of a social outcast Chris is, he takes it upon himself to teach him how to stand up to his bullies.
I'll teach you how.
Why would you do that for me?
I'm your brother, Chris. We're a team and we've got to look out for each other.
But Chris just isn't sharp enough to come up with his own witty retorts, so Stewie hides inside of his backpack to feed him lines.
I heard you were born out of your mom's butt. I heard that from your mom while I was doing her.
It actually works to the point where they then also defend other kids from bullies, and he soon becomes so popular that he even gets nominated for the student body president. But once Stewie decides that Chris doesn't need him anymore and tries to leave, Chris locks him inside of the backpack. From that point on, Stewie is essentially his prisoner. Chris even taunts him during an escape attempt.
You're gonna die in there.
Eventually, Stewie makes Chris realise that he's now become the bully, and while Chris does apologise at the end, it doesn't really undo the fact that he stuffed his baby brother inside of a backpack and kept him prisoner.
Name one person who loves you.
Wow.
Next up, failing to do a cutaway in Season 13's Brian the Closer. In the Griffin household, you're expected to know how to land a cutaway joke properly. And unfortunately for Chris, he's still learning. When his attempt resulted in an incredibly mundane cutaway, his parents are severely disappointed.
That was just awful, Chris.
Terrible.
He is not ready for flashbacks.
No, he is not.
It's a pretty harmless moment, and if anything, Chris's cutaway is actually kinda wholesome. But if you ask his parents, then they'd say it's the worst thing ever. causing the school librarian to have a heart attack in season 14's An App a Day. When Chris sends a D-pic to a classmate, he's hauled into the principal's office. As a result, he's registered as a sex offender, and even Herbert refuses to go near him.
Oh my God! Children, run! It said pervert! Everybody into my safety basement! Oh!
No longer wanting to be seen as a sex-craved pervert, Chris gets himself chemically castrated.
Now nobody will have any reason to be afraid of me or think I'm a pervert.
As a result, Chris has absolutely no sex drive. But when he starts talking to a girl and she places a hand on him, his suppressed impulses come rushing back and he runs off in a panic to relieve himself. The librarian witnesses this and suffers a fatal heart attack.
You killed that librarian, but we're glad to have you back to your old self.
Mrs. Laporta worked at that school for 54 years.
Stealing money from old people, from season 14's The Heartbreak Dog. When Meg starts working at a retirement home, she begins swiping valuables from the residents, and when Chris discovers her giant stash, he's initially shocked.
Stealing is just plain. Oh my God, is that someone else's glasses? Wow, this is awesome. I want in.
Chris escalates things in a particularly disturbing way though, by manipulating the elderly residents into believing that they've died, before then locking them in closets and taking their belongings. Eventually, the situation spirals so far that Chris and Meg start behaving like the very people they're exploiting. Realizing that they've gone too far, they then attempt to return the stolen items, only to then be confronted by the residents, and for their punishment, they have to sit and listen to everyone's long dementia-ridden stories. This just shows how far Chris has fallen, as he immediately wants to help his sister exploit old people, with absolutely no pressure. Killing most of his classmates in season 16's The D in Apartment 23. When Brian posts a controversial tweet about Ride Along 3, it goes viral and gets him cancelled. The backlash spreads to the whole Griffin family and it follows Meg and Chris to school. The other students confront them and things quickly spiral out of control into a Kingsman-style fight sequence. Meg and Chris are fighting side by side as they seriously maim or kill almost everyone at school. Now, to be fair to Chris, the other kids did start it. They were looking for a fight, and they definitely got one.
It was a joke.
Stabbing the Michelin Man in season 17's Stand By Meg. After Chris befriends a group of stereotypical Italian mechanics, he becomes a wise guy himself and starts helping them deal with their competition. And I think Lois says it best.
That's silly, but it's still murder.
And while it is absurd on the surface, he still killed someone, even if they were just a fictional mascot. Beheading his dad in season 17's Hefty Shades of Grey. So I've tried to stay away from cutaways as they literally have nothing to do with the plot, but I think the next two deserve a mention because they feel a bit more like flashbacks. While Chris is trying to give up sugar, he suddenly snaps and violently tears Peter's head off. But mother like son, I guess, because Lois also tears off Peter's head later on. So maybe he gets his violent streak from her. But even in a comedic context, it highlights how unstable Chris's reactions can really be, and how he can explode into violence at a moment's notice. This is something that happens a lot. By the way, I just love how Meg and Stewie don't even react to this. It's like it's just another Tuesday for them. Slaughtering a pod of dolphins in season 19's Stewie's First Word. While sharing a jet ski, Chris and Peter accidentally crash into a group of dolphins.
Kill every last one of them.
What makes this moment stand out is how casually he wants to harm these creatures. But hey, animal abuse is nothing new from Chris. Now we have to talk about his creepy behaviour towards women. So Chris has a long-running pattern of being incredibly inappropriate towards women. Over time, it's shifted from clueless teen energy into something far more deliberately creepy. For example, in season 19, after Brian breaks up with his girlfriend, Chris jumps into her car as she drives away.
Touch my feet!
In season 20, while Lois is teaching piano to a student called Alana, Chris does this.
As you were.
And the freakiness doesn't stop there, because a season later he cuts a hole in a seat so Bonnie could sit on his face.
Chris?
I've been caught, but I'll never be sorry.
Feels like Chris has to do at least one incredibly pervy thing every season.
I have $3.74. Do something to me. I love you.
He will definitely be put on a list one day, especially if this future cutaway actually happens.
You have a beautiful child, Mrs. Roberts.
Kidnapping Meg and putting her in a warehouse in season 18's Better Off Meg. When Meg is presumed dead after a car accident, her family are devastated, despite mistaking her for a barrel the entire day. And at school, Chris quickly starts receiving sympathy from everyone. He even starts wearing a t-shirt that reads "Dead Sis Who Dis." Chris is loving his dead sister life, until Meg reveals that she's alive after all. And after hearing her emotionally talk about how much she missed her family, he locks her inside of a van.
Sorry, Meg, but I can't let you come home just yet. I'm too popular now.
He then pays someone to tie her up inside an abandoned warehouse, and in a desperate bid to escape, she injures herself to the point where she has to slide out on her blood, before then gate crashing her own memorial. But even after everything is revealed, he still continues pretending she's dead.
And I think if Meg were here today, she'd be the first one to agree.
I am here!
If I had a nickel every time Chris kidnapped one of his siblings, then I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is kinda weird it's happened twice. Recording his parents having sex from season 21's The Candidate. When Doug spreads a rumour that Stewie was a mistake, he is devastated. This is when Chris lets Stewie in on the fact that he has his own secret room. But instead of high-tech weapons, it's filled wall to wall with porn, with an entire shelf dedicated to his parents. And he just so happens to have the footage of the exact night that Stewie was conceived. So yeah, Chris secretly keeps hidden cameras in his parents' room, which are put on a quote-unquote grunt setting to capture every time they do the nasty. And apparently recording them wasn't enough for him either, because in season 9's Trading Places, Chris tries to pay Peter and Lois to do it in front of him.
I want you two to do it right in front of me, and I'm gonna throw $40 on your sweaty bodies when you're done.
This is one of the most disturbing recurring gags with Chris. We all know he has a porn addiction, but filming people without their consent is incredibly creepy. Add on the fact it's his own parents, and the creep factor is dialed up to 1,000,000. Him taking nude photos of his mom in season 22's Teacher's Heavy Pet. When Lois goes undercover as a substitute teacher, all the boys at school fancy her, and when the jocks spot Chris riding in the same car as the teacher, they assume they're secretly dating. Realising he'll be a legend if people believe it, Chris decides to go along with the rumour.
She and I slept together under the same roof.
Chris suddenly becomes super popular in school, but Meg points out that if people think this relationship is real, their mum could end up in prison. But Chris doesn't care and continues with the charade, but soon the boys want proof. Desperate not to lose his newfound cool kid status, Chris sneaks in while Lois is showering and secretly takes a photo. He then sends it to the guys, who immediately then forward it to the entire school. When Lois finds out, she is horrified, but she soon feels bad when Chris explains that he just wants to fit in. So to make things right, Chris tries to come clean, but after seeing her son immediately become an outcast again, she doubles down and says that they did actually hook up. And just like that, Chris gets to stay popular again, while Lois ends up facing 6 years in prison. This is one of the most selfish things that Chris has ever done. Meg literally warned him that Lois could end up behind bars if he continued with it, and he still went ahead with it because he enjoyed being popular. And there we have it, those are the worst things that Chris Griffin has ever done in Family Guy. Have I missed any out? If so, let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.